No, I'm not. Look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all on aluminum or steel or cars. We're not going to bend. We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. We've been subjected to costs that we shouldn't be subjected to. In the case of Canada, we're spending $200 billion a year to subsidize Canada.
It's hard to make a deal with the US when your government apparatus is literally extorting money from those very same Americans whom you're trying to make a deal with. And no, this is not a hyperbole. So what is that all about, and why is Trump pissed? Wow, I never thought I'd see this, but 14 Liberal MPs have turned their backs on Carney. Is this the beginning of the end for the regime? But sadly, it might also be the end for Premier Danielle Smith, as she's making the exact same mistake that Carney is making right now. So why do they keep falling for it every single time? My name is Daniel, and this is The Right Call. Like, share, subscribe, hype this video up. Any interaction on this channel helps push the truth out, and maybe someday break that CBC-induced coma that so many Canadians are under. And if you're tired of that same old government and media BS and finally want some common sense commentary, well, smash that subscribe button because you found the right place. Man, I'm excited about this video today. I love seeing the cracks forming in the Carney government. It's like a Friday surprise, so stick around. You don't want to miss this. But for now, so the CRTC is behaving more like the Italian mob these days than anything else.
Canada's broadcast regulator is looking to make major streaming service providers pay a steeper price to operate in this country, in part to better support the creation of Canadian content. Ashley Burke now on the plan and why some worry this could further fuel trade tensions with the U.S.
Side note, none, and I mean none of the Canadian content creators or streaming companies have asked for this at all. We don't want them to promote our content. We want them to stay as far away as possible from our content, as a matter of fact.
American streaming giants like Netflix, Disney, and Amazon Prime now being ordered to spend more money in Canada, whether they want to or not.
No one ever likes being regulated. No one ever likes particularly being asked that they should pay more into a system. Clearly, streamers would have preferred not to have.
In just a second, this doofus, by the way, look at him. Look at this guy. That's the guy that is forcing what I'm about to talk about, ramming it down everyone's throat. This dude is in charge of what your eye sees. He thinks he knows better what you want to see than yourself.
Base contributions, much less the requirements today.
The CRTC says to ease the burden on Canadian broadcasters, it's demanding big streaming platforms contribute 15% of their annual Canadian revenue to support Canadian content.
No, not to ease the burden on Canadian broadcasters. No, to make up for their incapability of competing on the global stage. Instead of promoting meritocracy, we're promoting mediocrity and forcing others, as usual, to pay for it.
Most of the rest of the European Union are in the single digits when it comes to these kinds of requirements. And so Canada, with this decision, becomes really one of the most expensive jurisdictions for streamers to operate in.
The big American streaming platforms are already in federal court challenging the 5% levy the CRTC imposed in 2024.
The escalation from 5% to 15% is seen as an additional trade escalation.
And see, that's the thing with the government. You give them an inch, they take a mile. It started with 5% and everyone was against it. And within 2 years, they've increased it threefold to 15%. What gives? This is why I keep telling people, stop bending over for the government and agreeing to their silly rules, because they will just ask for more and more and more. At one point, you just have to put your foot down and say, no. No more.
Watchers in the U.S. call the Canadian measures discriminatory and say consumers will ultimately pay the price.
Basically would result in higher subscription costs being paid by the consumer.
There could also be a political cost. Republican Congressman Lloyd Smucker introduced legislation in March. It calls for an investigation into what he describes as Canada's unfair policies. It's another potential irritant for U.S. President Donald Trump. His team has been pressing Canada to make concessions as CUSMA comes up for review in July. The group representing all the major American streamers released a statement condemning the CRTC decision, saying it violates the free trade deal and urging Canada to to reconsider.
I want to bring your attention to one of the points that Michael Geist here said. Most of the rest of the European Union are in the single digits when it comes to these kinds of requirements. Canada has become the most expensive jurisdictions for online streaming services to operate in. Why? We're not a big market to begin with. Again, it's self-inflicted pain. We love to put sticks in our own wheels everywhere we go. Then furthermore, they go on to pretend that the CRTC is at arm's length from the government. But here's the deal. Major CRTC decisions with economic and trade impacts, especially the ones drawing issues, ire, or criticism from the US and court challenges, are coordinated at senior levels between the CRTC, heritage officials, and the Government of Canada. The CRTC chair and commissioners regularly engage with the minister's office, while the CRTC makes the specific regulatory calls. After that consultation, of course, the government sets the overarching policy and is briefed in advance. So what does this mean? That means that the decisions of the CRTC are not independently made. Rather, it's rubber stamped by the government. The government has agreed to it. So this is coming from Carney directly. And the US sees this as a deliberate antagonization of trade negotiations. And rightfully so, because this disproportionately affects American companies. Because, of course, in Canada, we don't have our own streaming services. Why don't we ask the question why? Why hasn't any entrepreneur started a streaming service to rival YouTube or Rumble or Spotify? Why? Spotify is Swedish. Well, it's because we're not competitive in Canada and we don't promote entrepreneurship. That's why. Like Brian Lilly wrote in his Toronto Sun column today, the CRTC doesn't care about trade negotiations. Scott Shortliff, vice president of broadcasting at the CRTC, that was the hefty dude with the pink shirt looking like he was all, disheveled there, told reporters in a media briefing Thursday that he's not concerned with trade negotiations because the government agency doesn't concern themselves with such matters. If the CRTC won't, then the Mark Carney government, which the CRTC reports to, should. That is, if they actually want to lift tariffs that are killing jobs in areas like steel, aluminum, auto, and lumber. Shortliff is a bureaucrat, one who has been in positions at Canadian Heritage and the CRTC helping government squeeze the life out of broadcast sector for year after year. This is a man who wields enormous power of a sector he has never worked in and doesn't understand. I agree with Brian Lilly there. The Carney admin just loves to undermine the US at every turn and every chance they get. This entire ordeal plays on two angles. The obvious is that it continues to undermine the US and as such erode our partnership with them. I've covered this time and time again. This emboldens the liberal base. Carney loves this because as long as the liberals are fighting with the US, they're polling up. For some reason, a specific subset of the Canadian voter base loves hating on the US. So this helps the liberals stay in power. And it also helps China and the EU by pushing us further into their arms at the detriment of Canada. Only Canada suffers in this because both China and the EU represent much smaller economic partners. They cannot replace the United States. I've said this, I'll say it again, I don't care. The US sees this as an attack on CUSMA. I like to say USMCA instead. And let me reiterate, it's 15% of revenues that the CRTC is asking these streaming providers or platforms to contribute. 15% of revenues, not profits. Not what's left over when they've expensed everything and the cost of doing business and paying taxes. No. This is pre-everything. This is even pre-corporate tax. This is purely revenue. It is insane. It's ludicrous. Anyone who's ever run a business or knows anything about accounting knows how messed up this is. And let's not even talk about the fact that YouTube or Spotify, they're not broadcasters. They don't produce content. They're purely hosting platforms. People like me, people like you, people like creators choose to put their content there. CBC chooses to put its content there. Nobody's forcing anyone to put the content. They host it and that's it. They don't produce anything. Netflix is the only company that I'm somewhat mitigated on because they do produce Netflix original content. And as such, they behave a bit like a broadcaster. So you know what? Maybe this should apply to them. But YouTube? Really? Spotify? Really?
Well, what did we learn this week? The Liberal-appointed CRTC wants to increase taxes on your streaming services. A 15% tax on Canadians streaming Netflix and other online services. A tax on your drink, a tax on the show that you're watching while you enjoy that drink, a tax when you get in the car in the morning to drive to work, a tax on your paycheck. Everywhere you turn, Mark Carney is in your pocket. Conservatives oppose the Netflix tax, and we call on the Carney Liberals to reverse their tax increase and let Canadians enjoy their streaming in peace.
Because yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a tax on the consumer. Because what do you think Netflix is going to do? They're going to increase the subscription cost. No shit. Which business wants to take a haircut of 15% from their revenue, not even profit, to support Canadian media, which, by the way, doesn't go to people like me. It doesn't go to most independent Canadian media creator. It goes to the CBC that already gets $1 billion+. Look, if you can't make it work commercially, if you cannot be commercially viable with $1.4 billion of taxpayer money, maybe your business deserves to die. I'm going to say, maybe the CBC needs to take the way, and, the pasture. Go out the pasture. Retire. It ain't working. Because all this helps the Liberals control opposition. Because, again, all this new money goes to the companies that they support. It doesn't go to, say, Juno News. It doesn't go to anyone who holds the government accountable. No. They are on their own. They have to make it commercially viable. I have to put this time in and hope to make it work because I ain't getting access to millions of dollars coming from them. That's for sure. So, by the way, if you want to help, subscribe to Patreon. But I digress, because the CRTC is also pushing these platforms like YouTube to manipulate the algorithm, to give predominance to trusted sources like the CBC and CTV at the cost of what? Of people like me. We are being demoted, deranked, our impressions are being killed in order for the CBC to be pushed on top of the queue. This is anti-competitive, and it also, by the way, creates a negative feedback loop. If governments choose winners and losers, the companies that are chosen as winner have no incentive to improve. They have no incentive to put out content that is quality, that people want to consume. Why? They receive billions of dollars, and on top of that, they get free boost of visibility even though nobody wants to watch them. It is the antithesis of what free market capitalism should be like. But again, it helps the government stay in power. At this point, it's more than just promoting Canadian culture or Canadian content. This is not only anti-competitive. No, this deeply dives into propaganda level manipulation. They want to make sure that only state-sanctioned news show and content makes it to your eyes. They want to control effectively what you think.
A narrative here that is not, frankly, good news for Canada when we sit down at those tables in 5 or 6 weeks. It's going to be a narrative that is putting Canada, rightly or wrongly, but from the Washington point of view, wrongly, in a place that says, well, you're provoking the president, you're provoking the administration, you're demanding more, you're negotiating while not negotiating. And they reference the Davos speech, they reference Canada's new strategic partnership with China, some of the other interventions that have been made, including by premiers. All of this, frankly, doesn't bode well for a successful negotiation.
So I ask again, why the constant, purposeful, deliberate undermining of our trade negotiations with the US? It's going to be really hard for the elbows up crowd to keep the whole "it's America's fault" narrative if we continue to be the sole reason things are going bad for us. But things are not just going bad for us. Carney's having a really bad day today.
Justin, do you think people inside the Liberal tent could make this very difficult for the Prime Minister?
Yes, but I don't think it's going to be the people you think it is. So Stephen Guilbeault, for sure, resigned from cabinet to some degree in protest of the government's kind of oil and gas policies. But I'm told he's actually been pretty collaborative with Carney's office over the last couple of months. I'm told the Prime Minister's office calls him pretty frequently, and he picks up, he offers advice. He has not been the thorn in their side that maybe we were expecting him to be. Meanwhile, you have Jonathan Wilkinson, who I think was kind of angling to be that kind of grumpy Gus in caucus about, the deprioritization of climate. He's off to Europe now, so he's gone. Here's what's interesting. So I was talking to a caucus source last night. There's a clear need for the Liberals to have a champion in BC who can come out and actually make the case for this pipeline and sort of some of the climate deals around it. You would think that would be Gregor Robertson, kind of their biggest high-profile MP cabinet minister out on the West Coast. I'm told that Gregor Robertson joined a caucus call this week, basically made clear he was extremely unhappy with the final deal with Danielle Smith, and basically said, don't call me tomorrow, I'm not going to be available. So, and he was notoriously missing from a big LNG announcement on the West Coast as well. So you don't actually have a big champion right now. Carney does not have a lieutenant in BC who's selling this deal. I think that's very telling. On top of the fact that there's also been some kind of disgruntlement about Gregor Robertson's delivery as housing minister, you have to start to wonder, does Mark Carney need to find a new sort of lieutenant for British Columbia who can actually convince Eby and the province and his caucus that this is going to work out? Never mind the problems you have in Quebec, where there's also a number of MPs who are apart from Guilbeault who are unhappy about this. So this is a difficult political question, and Mark Carney does not love solving difficult political questions.
Carney doesn't like to solve complex political problems. Yeah, no shit. Carney loves yes men, yes people, But he's not getting it because this big, bad liberal tent is having a really hard time staying up. Which is something I predicted, and I'll explain more on why this decision to invite so many different views under one tent is always the pitfall to every politician. But for now, cracks are starting to form in the Carney government and internal rebellion is being stirred up. This came out today. 14 Liberal MPs pen a letter to Carney raising concerns over environmental backslide. Letter was sent to PM prior to the latest pipeline agreement with Alberta. Liberal MP Stephen Guilbeault may be the most outspoken, but he's not the only member of his party unhappy with Prime Minister Mark Carney's environmental rollbacks. Carney signed a new agreement with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith last week that could see construction of an oil pipeline to the west coast as early as September 2027. 14 Liberal MPs sent a letter to the Prime Minister at the end of April before the agreement with Alberta government was even signed to offer some recommendations, but also to express their unease with the situation. Despite signing their names at the bottom of the letter, the MPs do not want to be publicly identified, stating that their approach is intended to be constructive and respectful. My first thought is this: 14 Liberal MPs want to return to Justin Trudeau's $200 billion climate change plan that failed to hit a single of the government's greenhouse emission goals, by the way. Why? But then the second thing that struck me was the part where, despite signing their names at the bottom of the letter, the MPs do not want to be publicly identified, stating that their approach is intended to be constructive and respectful, whatever that means. Why is the CBC hiding their names? Why are they protecting them? The job of a journalist is to dig for the truth. You'd think this would make for a bombshell story to expose, but yet they're not. They're being mute about who wrote the letter. I say name every single one of them. MPs don't get to campaign on accountability and then govern through anonymity. If they signed it, own it. Then constituents can decide whether they agree or not. Anonymous dissent is encouraged. If anything, it's actually cowardice. But ultimately, Carney right now is between a rock and a hard place. His personal financial future is deeply tied through countless conflicts of interest to the GFAN's goals. Net zero, decarbonization, sustainability, all the hysteria the world adored over the last decade failed to do anything that it was stated to do. And yet, in exchange, it destroyed the economies of major countries, and now people are moving en masse away from it. It's over. People don't want this stuff no more. It was a fad. We've realized we were sold an emergency, a crisis, and people realize, okay, let's rally up. People are willing to do a lot of things to save something they consider to be valuable. But then nothing happened. It was all smoke and mirrors, and people started suffering because the economy's just collapsed. We're over. We're done. Well, the problem with Carney is that his caucus, including himself, is filled with zealots, which he inherited from the Trudeau days, by the way. So on one hand, he has to appeal to these people and to his own personal financial interests. But on the other hand, Canadians are deeply suffering economically. That's just the truth. That's a matter of fact. The economy is completely shot. MPs are starting to feel the pressure from their constituents. Provinces are talking about leaving the Federation. And a big reason why all of this is happening is because of failed economic policies that are tied to this entire net zero agenda. So, in typical politician fashion, he tried to appeal to both sides. And now, it's backfiring hard. With such a slim majority, any dissent or infighting will put an untold stress on the Liberals' grip on power. And it will continue to push him to make mistakes that piss off both sides. I have hope that just like Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney will bring about the demise of the Liberal Party. But Mark Carney ain't the only one who's playing with fire and making, in my humble opinion, major tactical blunders, because the same pitfalls that so many politicians make time and time again are being made by...
This premier will not have a legal mistake by a single judge silence the voices of hundreds of thousands of Albertans. That's not the Alberta way. Alberta's future will be decided by Albertans, not the courts. Our government will therefore be appealing the decision to Alberta's Court of Appeal and, if necessary, the Supreme Court of Canada. But this process will take many months and possibly years before being addressed by those higher courts. In the meantime, under our legal system, this troubling court decision is binding law in Alberta until it is successfully appealed. This means that it is unlikely the courts will permit Elections Alberta to hold a binding provincial referendum on separation until this incorrect ruling is overturned or clarified. But there is another way to hear from Albertans while we wait for our legal appeal to be heard. That is why I'm announcing today that I will be requesting our government add an additional question to the October 19th referendum vote announced previously. The additional question will be, should Alberta remain a province of Canada? Or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada? Because this proposed referendum question does not directly trigger separation, but if successful, would ask Alberta's government to commence the legal process necessary to hold a binding referendum on the matter, the recent court ruling would not be applicable, and the referendum question I outlined could proceed. This question will also ensure the 700,000 signatories to both the Forever Canada petition and the Stay Free Alberta petition are respected, and the will of Albertans is heard. Kicking the can down the road only prolongs a very emotional and important debate, and muzzling the voices of hundreds of thousands of Albertans wanting to be heard is unjustifiable in a free and democratic society.
So, in short, Alberta will be holding a referendum October 19th, but not on separation. No. Rather, on whether they should actually hold a binding referendum later that would actually lead to separation. Think for a second how crazy that is. Let's hold a referendum on whether or not we should have a referendum. Why not skip all of that and just hold the damn referendum in the first place? It makes me laugh. It's beyond ludicrous. So what is that tactical blunder I keep referring to that politicians make time and time again? She's not committing to anything. She's trying to stay neutral. She's trying to appease every side. She's trying to appeal to every side. And in the process, she's appealing to no one and angering everyone. One side is attacking her for holding a referendum on a referendum,
saying loudly since she was elected, and even before she was elected, that we need pipelines, we need natural gas pipelines, we need oil pipelines, we need to get our product to market, and we need foreign investment. What is she doing? She wants to hold a referendum so that foreign investors will say, you know what, I think I'll wait before I put any money in here because, capital does not like disruption. They do not like uncertainty. And now she's created uncertainty. I mean, I'm sure the Prime Minister privately must be pulling out his hair out of his head, like, what is going on with him?
And then the other side feels betrayed.
I got to process what just happened tonight. It's easy to get angry. It's easy for me to come on here. You've seen it before. But that doesn't solve anything. When I joined Alberta Independence, it was because I want what's best for the future of this province. And what's best for the future of this province right now is everybody getting angry and raging online.
So I used to run a tech company. I did so for 10 years. And throughout my 10 years, I worked in Canada, I worked in the US, I raised millions of dollars from Canadian and American investors. I got to learn a lot and be mentored by incredible individuals. And there was this book that was the foundation of most of my business decisions. It's a book called Rework, and I cannot recommend it enough. But in the book, they talk about a very important thing that applies sadly to politicians. They should read that book too. See, Rework is written by two tech founders, incredible individuals. And in there they say, strong opinions aren't free. They'll turn some people off. They'll accuse you of being arrogant and aloof. That's life. For everyone who loves you, there will be others who hate you. And if no one's upset by what you're saying, you're probably not pushing hard enough. And you're probably boring too. Lots of people hate us because our products do less than the competition's. They're insulted when we refuse to include their pet feature. But we're just as proud of what our products don't do as we are of what they do. We designed them to be simple because we believe most software is too complex. Too many features, too many buttons, too much confusion. So we build software that's the opposite of that. If what we make isn't right for everyone, that's okay. We're willing to lose some customers if it means that others love our product intensely. That's our line in the sand. When you don't know what you believe, everything becomes an argument. Everything is debatable. But when you stand for something, decisions are obvious. And furthermore, when you stand for something, you don't fall for everything. And see, that's the problem. When you try to appeal to everyone, you end up pissing off everyone and you end up doing nothing right. Look, the best example. It's like the 2-in-1 shampoo conditioner combo. It does neither well. It sucks at both jobs. So that's why it's incredibly important for politicians, just like CEOs of companies, to pick their land in the sand, to make it known, and to stand behind something. And politicians make this mistake every single time, and it always brings about their demise. They try to rally everyone behind them, they drop campaign promises, or worse, they dilute them in order to appeal to more people after being elected. This only pisses off the base that got them elected in the first place and rarely does enough to convince those who oppose you to come to your side anyways. So, with regards to Danielle Smith and her silly decision, by making the decision to hold a referendum on a referendum, she's pissing off 300,000 Albertans, which is 20% of the voter base, by the way, who signed a petition to hold the separation referendum. She also pisses off roughly the 30 to 40% of the population who said they were open to separation. She appears to be against separation, and even worse, against democracy and the rule of law, namely, the Citizens Initiatives Act that enables citizens to bring about a referendum question on the ballot if they garner enough votes. But then she's also pissing off the loyalist camp, the anti-separation camp, because they see her choice to hold the referendum on a referendum as pandering to the separatists. She's giving them a tiny little breadcrumb, and that's enough to piss them off. Due to the fact that she did not take a solid stance behind anything, she appears to support both camps, which both camps see as an attack on themselves. And now she's alone with no one supporting her.
Just like Canada. Canada is the greatest country in the world, but it can be better, and we're working on making it better. We're working with Alberta on making it better. Just a week ago, I was in Calgary with Premier Smith.
Sure you are, Carney. You're clearly working hard to make it better. We're doing so much better since you're in office. Oh my God. Sarcastic as hell, by the way, for those who don't realize it. Thanks to Bill C-11, I have plenty of liberals now watching my show, commenting some amazing, downright a little crazy things in the comment. By the way, very entertaining. If you want to do something over the weekend, read the comments. It's especially with the past few videos. They're cringy. Heck, they're even violent. The tolerant left. Always so tolerant, except if you don't think like them, of course. But anyways, Danielle Smith, she just missed a golden opportunity to oppose Carney and become the hero the province needs. Clearly, Carney is out there making a fool of Canada. Why doesn't Danielle Smith take a stance and oppose Carney instead of making deals with him? The good thing is, I've been hearing through the grapevines that she doesn't really care anyways, since her entire political career ends with this term. She's not going back or coming back for election. She's going off into the sunset. Apparently she has American properties. Good for her. Kind of jealous. But yeah, sadly her legacy will now endure. From one of the most loved and supported premier to downright being detested. So never make that mistake. Always stand for something. Even if it pisses off some people, in turn, you'll garner superfans who will back you up more than anyone else ever would. If you've enjoyed this report and found some value and want to get yourself involved in helping spread the message and grow the channel, aside from liking, commenting, sharing, hyping this video up, if you want to go a step further and you want to contribute financially, I have a Patreon. The link is in the description. It's $8 a month and it goes a long way in helping me put more time into creating this content. There's also a PayPal link if you want to do just a one-time donation. Anything helps and it is so deeply appreciated. And if you want to see a video of former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss completely destroying Carney, ramming him down and saying what she really thinks of him, well then click on this link right here. I made a video a couple days ago that talks about it. It is scalding. Honestly, I wish the media would blast this on air everywhere. They won't, so I have to. But for the time being, my name is Elliot Daniel and I'm going to go enjoy my weekend. You guys have a good one.